Well, hello there. Kumusta po kayo? How are you? And thank you for tuning in to another edition of Paul de Guzman Presents Art. So we're just outside the Unit Pitt Gallery here in the west side of Vancouver, built on the ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And we're about to go inside and have a look at the work of Al Razutis, which comprises of assemblages and holographic art. So I hope you can join me. Enjoy. Okay, so we're just gonna go inside and have a look and open the door and just gonna do a little bit of a pan of the show, and we're gonna go through this chronologically, right? Because there's this piece over here, and then we're just gonna pan through the entire exhibition. And when I first introduced the show, it's by Al Razutis. Now, to be honest, I don't really know very much about Al or his work, and but I'll give you a little bit of a context in terms of what I know, and then we will go from there. So, who is Al Razutis, anyways? So from what I can figure, I'm going to tell you a story. And it's a story that was relayed to me by the director of the gallery when I visited about a couple of weeks ago. And the curator, this is a curated show. It's curated by Felix Rapp. And apparently, from what I've heard, Felix was actually going through some experimental films on the internet and happened upon some works by Al Razutis. And so after researching a little bit on the work of this artist, he discovered that he actually also did some holographic art back in like the 80s, like around the mid 80s to maybe till as late as 1989 or something. And so after he did all of that research, he found out that actually he still lives here in the sort of like the British Columbia area on an island called Saturna Island, where he's been since the 80s. And I guess maybe he just got fed up with the Vancouver's artistic sort of like, I don't know, the art scene here in Vancouver. Maybe that's why he went over there. I mean, art is kind of like one of those things where you can be part of it and you can enjoy it, or at some point you may just want to sort of like retreat just so that you can have your solitude and create your art on your own. But Al is actually in his like late 80s. So it's great for him to actually sort of still be active and discovered by a young curator. And so there are currently 7 works in this show, and we're going to go through them one at a time, all right? Now, this is the first piece that we're going to look at. I hope it focuses well. It's called Stand In for Subject to Time, and it's 2010. But this is not the original work, because the original work was actually done in 1984, 1985. Let's see if we can see what's inside there. So this was reconstructed because it was lost apparently to a garbage compactor. And I wanted to sort of like focus on the histories of these objects because the nature of the works that Al did for these are sculptures with holograms as part of the work. They can be embedded in the work, but what do we know about holography anyways? So we're just gonna go focus on this one. And then this work is Newtonian Galactic Assembly Line, 1974 to 1976. There's 36 silver halide holograms in a brass welded frame. So when holograms were kind of like invented, they were kind of like a really cool thing to have. But like with most technologies, you know, they tend to sort of like, we're always going to struggle in terms of their usefulness to our society. And it was actually mentioned that it's sad that holograms didn't sort of take off very well. Because, you know, what do we use holograms for? You know, we have them in banknotes, we have them in passports, there are security features, but nothing really exciting. I was kind of like maybe mentioning something that's more science fiction in nature. But, you know, when you go into, let's say, science fiction series like Star Trek, where they have a hollow deck, you know, that's probably the most advanced use of hologram technology we can actually even think of, but in reality it doesn't really exist, right? So the gears that you're seeing here are the holograms themselves. And it's interesting because sometimes, you know, you're almost just wanting to reach and touch it, but it's not really there. And we're just gonna go to another work here, which is this one. And this one is called Fragment from Surrogate Dressed for Art Nouveau, 1984. It's a dichromate reflection hologram. It's a small piece, it's 6 by 8 inches. And I was kind of like thinking about how these objects are often sort of like created with, let's say, assemblages, or I would say objects that have a life of their own. You know, these are all kind of like, these are things that you can sort of like get from thrift stores, you know? And I've often sort of like looked at the independent life of objects and the histories that they represent, and then to sort of incorporate something futuristic in them gives them some sort of like a new life. Now what we're looking at here, see there's this sort of like a face, but you almost, when you're in the gallery, you almost just want to sort of like touch it because there's this sort of like three-dimensionality about it. And I've been kind of like thinking about virtual reality and the holograms. And we're just going to go to the next piece over here. And this one is called Ether Vein 2. It was restored. There's a little note here that says the original work was in 1984. And it was erased in Garley maintenance mishap. Reconstructed work 1984, restored in 2010. So I was kind of like mentioning something about virtual reality, wherein, you know, like where virtual reality is this sort of like reality, you need some sort of like glasses, I guess. And then it kind of like projects some sort of image in your mind, which is actually sort of like a reversal in terms of spatial sort of complexities when you look at holograms, because holograms tend to sort of like project their images forward rather than it being an imagined sort of reality in terms of virtual reality. And I'm not really sure why it didn't catch on, you know. I mean, the interesting thing about technology is that it's almost like there's always an obsolescence built into technologies. Like when you look at, let's say, cassette tapes, you know, they were very popular many, many years ago. And then you kind of look at CDs, and then you look at, let's say, other technologies. Like, for example, I'm sure your cell phone will probably be replaced by something newer in about a period of about 2 or 3 years, but that's just the nature of technological obsolescence, right? And then this one is called Prima Materia, Invisible Section, 1974 to 75. Reflection hologram collage on film, resin, glass, and brass. I look at these assemblages and there's this sort of like classic sort of like assemblage look to them of being sort of like aged and being sort of used, almost a reclamation of material. And in Vancouver, especially in the West Coast, you know, when you have weather like this, a lot of objects tend to be sort of like weathered. The oxides are developing on metallic surfaces, and wood tends to get sort of like woodworm and stuff. So you have that sort of sense of the West Coast when you're looking at this type of weathering, which is kind of similar to the weathering that happens in, let's say, tropical and very humid areas, because Vancouver is technically a rainforest. So there's this almost really ethereal quality about these works that tend to sort of like suggest histories and time past. And then you have these technologies, which is holographic, that tends to sort of like go forward into the future. So there's that sort of dichotomy of actually reaching back and then leaping forward, which is kind of like what I tend to sort of like take away from these works when I'm looking at them. And the next piece we're going to look at is Catch Me, I'm Falling, Silver Halide Holographic Assemblage, 1985. So here's another one wherein the hologram is kind of like a little bit difficult to see, but it's the X. When you look at the X, that is the holographic image. And then it's mounted on this sort of like silver plated tray. And then it's got these hands that are jutting out. It's kind of interesting to sort of see that the entire sense of the assemblage format is predominantly a West Coast phenomena artistically. And also I was reading somewhere that holographic art is also kind of like a West Coast phenomenon as well. So sort of like looking at the marriage between two West Coast sort of like art forms, holograms and assemblages, seems to sort of like make for a really good merging or marriage of these two art forms. And the last piece we're going to look at is called... This is a fun piece actually, I quite like this one. It's Daddy's Spice Cabinet, Angel Baby, 1989, dichromate holographic assemblage. It's not very big, it's 16 by 28 inches. And on the side there is a little sort of like, I think it actually fits a toddler, that little shoe. And then the hologram is that eerie looking doll face inside that's green. And then you have a look at this little sort of like makeshift dollhouse on a shelf with miniature pieces of furniture and a little mirror. There's a lot to sort of like take when you're looking at assemblages, because every little nuance, every little object is nuanced with its own history in terms of it being like an object in the world and experiencing things and not really having anything or anybody to sort of experience it with. So it's not a long video today, and I hope you enjoyed that. I'll have information about the gallery and the press release when the gallery is open down in the description area, so please refer to that area for further information. And I hope you enjoyed this this foray into holographic art. It's very seldom that we actually have this experience of sort of like encountering this, apart from the banknotes and the passports that's used for security purposes, you know. And let's see now, I'm just trying to see which one is my favorite. I'm gonna end on this one. And I hope you like that. If you did, you can like this video. You can share it on your social media channels. You can also subscribe to the channel if you wish. It's free for you to enjoy. And on that note, I just want to thank you for joining me in this tour. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. This is the work of Razutis here at the Unit Pitt Gallery in the west side of Vancouver. And on that note, thank you again. I hope art informs your life. Goodbye.